I'm so grateful to see that you're all here this afternoon. I want to encourage you, you're welcome to sit closer if you'd like to. I always feel like when there's a gap with empty seats in the middle, then I'm kind of going like this from left to right. So if you want to move closer, you are free to do so. Those of you who have joined us for the week, have you felt like there were some new things that you learned? Did I overwhelm you to the point where you were feeling like you wanted to run away? Some yeses, some no's. We did cover quite a lot of information. And say again? I've heard that there have been some who have felt a new conviction to try the hot and cold showers. I think, if I understand correctly, there's been some shouting in the cold shower. Then you're doing it right. If you're not shouting, then you're not doing it right. When Adrian is in the shower and he comes out and I didn't hear anything, then I say to him, pretty sure you didn't do the cold rinse, did you? As long as you don't jump out of the water. How many of you tried the hot and cold showers? Few of you. Were you feeling cold afterwards or invigorated? It's amazing how that happens, right? It's the first time somebody said to me to try it, I thought, oh, you're absolutely insane. But it really does boost that blood circulation significantly. So with that in mind, I thought we can just start with a very brief summary of probably one of the most important take-home messages that we've had all week long. We've done kind of a journey through the body. We have spoken about blood circulation. We spoke about how different parts of the body can be a little bit of an alarm system for us, like the skeletal system, the joints that can get achy with arthritis and things like that, sometimes are not isolated just to a joint problem, but they can actually tell us that there's another problem. We learned about the ways in which God has built mechanisms into our bodies to detoxify, to get rid of toxins, and how we can support that. And then we also looked at the digestive tract, and we saw how the best possible care that we can give to the stomach and to the digestive tract can help us to actually get more nutrients from our food and make sure that we are not getting more toxins from our food. And we spoke about how all of those things together ultimately come back down to the basics, which is that the life is in the blood. How many of you recognize that verse from the Bible? Have you ever read that? There's a verse that is used in the Bible and it's actually repeated in more than one place, and we know that blood in the Bible has both an actual physical application as well as a symbolic application. But the Bible uses the phrase, the life is in the blood, and I think that that is not just symbolic, it definitely is an anatomically correct statement, because as we learned this week, not one single cell in the entire body can be healthy or can thrive if my blood doesn't have all the necessary things to deliver to that cell, or if my blood is full of toxins. That creates a lot of challenges as well. Those of you who joined us in this time period, I hope that you were also blessed by the awareness that this also is added. There's this incredible object lesson that is built into the body. Our entire existence, every cell of the body, depends on that good blood circulation, right? But the blood in and of itself doesn't move by its own force. It cannot move by its own force. It requires the heart to pump. And just as much as the heart is the driving force that creates that movement, that creates the power, in a similar way, God is the center of our universe. It is His love and His presence that sustains each and every one of us. It is also the blood of Christ that gives us life. And then the very interesting thing that we learned about is we spent a fair amount of time learning more about the blood vessels, which are the pipes that allow for the blood to flow. Can the blood get to the cells of the body if it can't flow through the pipes? If the pipes are blocked or damaged, there's a problem with the blood circulation, right? The Bible actually also has an analogy where it talks about us as being vessels. We don't produce the life-giving blood. We cannot create the force to move that blood around, but we can be vessels where God can share through us. Isn't that amazing? And knowing that we have been created to literally be a depiction, to be a picture that people can learn more about God through looking at our lives, it gives me a new respect for how I look after my health, how I look after the body that God has created. And today we're going to try and wrap all of that up. because we've spoken about different systems in the body, but today we're going to wrap all of this together by looking at the brain. Is the brain an important part of the body? How important?
The most.
It gives all the messages to the body.
Alright, so it gives a lot of messages. I'm hearing most important.
Your whole life.
There's a lot going on in the brain, right? And this is a graphic illustration. For those of you who haven't met Healthy Harry yet, this is Healthy Harry. I was very happy to do my first AI creation. I looked at all these young people doing amazing things, and it was there were some very interesting pictures that I came up with, or that ChatGPT came up with, but we at least got a character that we could use for our illustrations. And here we see an illustration of the central nervous system, where you've got the brain right at the top and all those nerves connecting there. Can we survive without a brain? We can't, right? Can the brain survive without blood? It can't. Does the brain also depend on the other organs of the body to be healthy, so that the blood can be healthy, so that it can be healthy? So do you see how all of this is interconnected, right? But rightfully said, the brain is the central point. It is the control center. And it has a controlling function over every single part of the body. Just like blood feeds every part of the body and helps to detoxify, take away the rubbish from every cell, the brain has a controlling function that affects every part of the body. And with that, we also know that those messages that come from the brain are transmitted in a certain way. Now, how did the blood move around in the body? Through the blood vessels, right? Through the veins and the arteries. So it flows through this pipe network. How does the brain communicate with the rest of the body? These nerves that we see here, how can we describe to somebody what they are? You were saying something as well? Absolutely. So the brain's messages go through the nerves that run through the spinal cord, and at that point it connects with the nerves that go outward. So you can see the spinal cord in the middle there, and then there are nerves that run all the way out, reaching every part of the body. But nerves, the easiest way to think about them, where the blood flows through pipes, the nerves basically are the same as electrical cables. So if you look at the cables running between our different electronic equipment, that is exactly how a nerve works. In fact, most nerves actually even have an insulation around it to make sure that that electricity stays inside the nerve and doesn't actually electrify things around it. Isn't that amazing? We saw this whole week how the Lord has made us fearfully and wonderfully, and the nervous system is definitely an inclusion of that. So just to quickly orientate ourselves, the nervous system consists of different parts. We've spoken about it as being a connection point that connects the brain to the rest of the body. So the brain is the main controlling center, but then the nerves run down the spinal cord and it connects with two other nervous systems. Is it important for those electrical messages to reach from the brain to the rest of the body? Okay. Why did the Lord create it so that those messages go through electrical cables and not through the pipes like the blood? How long does it take for the blood to flow through the pipes?
A long time.
Doesn't take, a whole long time, but for blood from my heart to reach my toes it could take almost a minute, depending on how quickly my blood is flowing, maybe a little bit less than that. If I touch something like the hot stove, is it going to be very helpful if it takes about a minute for that hand of mine to get the message to move away? It'll be a bit long, right? So these messages travel at lightning speed through these electrical cables to ensure that we can react quickly to danger, to pain, to something that does damage. It ensures a very quick response. That's amazing, right? Do you think it highlights and proves that there's an incredible designer behind this whole process? Absolutely. Now we want to zone in a little bit on the brain, and I know that this is a busy slide. We're not going to go through all the details. As I mentioned throughout the week, I've included extra details on these slides so that when we share the presentations with you, which we will do, you'll see that there's a way to join the WhatsApp group. And when we share this information with you, you can go and do a little bit of the extra reading, and it's there. But we want to focus on just understanding a little bit broadly how the brain has been put together, and it's actually been created to control different parts of the body with different parts of the brain. Now we can see the evidence of that when, for instance, somebody has had a stroke, because depending on where the blood supply has been cut off in the brain, it affects the body in different ways. I'm sure that you've noticed after a stroke, some people might have a leg that doesn't want to work anymore, or an arm, or maybe the whole half of a body, or just a portion. And that all depends on where exactly in the brain the problem actually occurred. Where was the blood supply cut off? Now, very briefly, we've got some key areas listed here. We've got the frontal lobe, we have the limbic system, we've got the area that controls motor, they call it the motor cortex, which is just for movements, controlling, making sure that I'm moving my arm and my leg and I'm not just doing all these funny movements all the time, but giving controlled instructions to the body parts. Then there's also the part that controls or interprets the sensation. So when I'm touching an object, have you noticed that you can pick up your toothbrush and you don't have to look at it, you know what you're picking up? That is because there's sensory control, where there's recognition of the things that you're touching. And then there's, of course, right at the back, we've got the visual control center, where the information coming through my eyes goes right to the back of the brain, and there it is interpreted so that I can understand what it is I'm looking at. It's not just flashes of light. We're going to focus primarily on two areas. We're just going to zoom in on those, and I want us to look at these two areas for a particular reason. Now, before you have a mini heart attack thinking I'm going to test you on all the details, one of the reasons why this is important for me, one of the reasons why I feel like all of us need to have some information about this, is because it actually gives us a lot of insight into what drives our decisions. So I'm going to start by focusing on this yellow part. It's drawn in yellow here. You don't have colors in your brain. It's not as colorful as these diagrams. They are just for understanding purposes. But this yellow part is part of the limbic system, and there are different components to that. And the easiest way for us to think about this limbic system is that it is the part of the brain that is driven by one motivation, and that is to restore me back to what is comfortable and what is good. Okay? So let me give you a couple of examples of that. If I'm feeling particularly cold at the moment, is it comfortable or uncomfortable? It's uncomfortable, right? So that part of the brain, the limbic system, is going to sense this is uncomfortable, and its focus is on doing what? Trying to get me back to what is comfortable, okay? So that will drive the motivation for me to get my jacket and put a jacket on, or to close the door for the cold wind, or whatever the case may be. So I've got different actions that come from that, but the motivation in that part of the brain is come back to whatever feels good. How many of you know the word lekker? We all know that word, right? That part of the brain says, I just want to feel lekker. Okay, so if you're wondering how to describe that to anybody, the limbic system wants you to feel lekker. So if you're not feeling lekker, it will want to get you back to lekker, which might mean putting on some more clothes if it's cold. What about if you're hungry?
Ice cream.
Okay, ice cream is very lekker. Exactly, so that part of the brain is going to say, I'm hungry, I want to eat, but it's also the part of the brain, you're very right, that says, but the ice cream tasted really good, I want more of that. The chocolate tasted good, I'd like more of that. The chocolate cake was very nice, I want 4 slices of the chocolate cake. That part of the brain is focused on feeling. You have to talk with me because it's after lunch, otherwise you're going to fall asleep, so we have to talk together. Okay, that all sounds pretty fine, right? Is it bad for me to want to put on clothing if I'm cold? It's a good thing, right? But what about that 4th slice of chocolate cake? Is that necessarily the best idea? Now here's the message for this part of the brain that I don't want you to miss. It wants you to feel lekker, and that is all that drives it. It does not have the ability to judge whether or not that particular decision has a negative consequence. It has no ability to calculate a risk, to evaluate, is this healthy, unhealthy, is this safe or unsafe. Right now, I might be feeling very hot, okay? Is it bad for me to be aware that I'm feeling too hot? It's not bad, right? It's protective. If I'm standing too close to the fire, is it good for me to know I'm too hot?
Yes.
Of course it is. So it's not like God put that part of the brain in there because He wants us to make bad decisions. It's protective. It's supposed to be there. But if I'm feeling too hot right now, would it be a safe decision for me to just decide, well, I'm going to take all my clothes off right now?
No.
This part of the brain cannot calculate risks. It cannot evaluate and say, you're standing in front of a wall full of people. So if I only make the decision with that part of the brain, I'm going to take my clothes off because it doesn't know. Are we together so far? Can we say that that part of the brain is almost like my toddler brain, my child brain? similar to a child's behavior. The child says, I want the ice cream right now. Dis lekker. And if you say no, then they throw a tantrum because they don't know necessarily that it's good or bad for them. The 2-year-old just says, I want what I want and I want it right now. That is how that part of the brain works. It is also the part of the brain where we sense that we're attracted to somebody. So is it necessarily a bad thing for us to be attracted? That's how we ended up probably meeting our marriage partners. But if I'm walking down the street and I'm feeling really attracted to somebody, is it important for me to recognize, well, this is not your husband? Okay? Can the limbic system recognize it? It can't. It doesn't know. It can make you aware that you are attracted to somebody, but it doesn't have risk calculation. It's got no higher calculation. It has no ability to tell you this is not the right situation. This is not the right decision. Are we together so far? So is that part of the brain bad in and of itself? No. But should a child, has the child been created to live independently?
No.
A toddler and a 2-year-old isn't meant to live alone, right? Is it bad for the toddler to be able to say, Mommy, I'm hungry? No. But who's supposed to make the final decision whether or not right now is the right time for eating? The toddler or the mom? The mom. So here is the point of this. The limbic system is there to make me feel lekker. It wants to bring me back to what feels comfortable, what is good, and that is not a bad thing. It helps me be aware if I'm too hot or too cold or too hungry, and that is okay, but it is not created to make the final decision. It's just there to make me aware of a need. The limbic system is meant to live or to be subordinate to the frontal lobe. Now, I want you to put your hand on your frontal lobe because you can literally do that. Your hand is now directly over your frontal lobe or the prefrontal cortex, the way we put it. Is this the highest part of your body? It is, right? Is this higher than your tongue? Is it higher than your stomach? It's supposed to make a higher decision. So I want you to recognize that and remember that. It's an easy way to remember what the function of this frontal lobe is. In case I actually forgot to mention that this is the back of the brain, this is the front. I assume that it's obvious, but I know that it doesn't. So this figure is drawn as though the head is looking that way. So this is the prefrontal cortex, and that front part of the brain is literally the part of the brain, the only part of the brain that can do the higher calculations. It can do the risk calculation. It is the part that says, I'm in front of people now, I have to be careful what I'm taking off. It's the part that says, you might be attracted. It gets the information from the limbic system, oh, you're attracted to this person, but it is the part of the brain that says, it's not your husband, walk away. Are we together? It is the part of the brain that recognizes that you're hungry, but then you've been sitting in the Healthy Harry lectures, so that frontal lobe is the part of the brain that's going to say, actually, you ate 2 hours ago, now's not a good time, you should wait a little while, your stomach is still busy. Are we together? Which part of the brain are you going to use for mathematical calculations? Yes? The frontal lobe. Yes. 4 slices, too much. 3, exactly. Which part of the brain are you going to use if you are sitting at work and you're problem solving on the computer and you're busy? Your frontal lobe. Okay. Which part of the brain is it that eats the 3rd slice of cake? That's a bit of a limbic system drive, right? Okay. Let me give you one last bit of information and then we're going to see how we apply this again. What happens if you have a whole room full of 2-year-olds and the teacher or the supervisor walks away and goes outside for 20 minutes?
Chaos.
It's funny, no matter where in the world I ask that question, everybody answers the same thing. Do we all agree that if you leave the 2-year-olds alone, that what is the point of that? When the frontal lobe is not bright and happy and wide awake, if the frontal lobe is not acting with the supervision power that it is meant to act with, then the limbic system is the part of the brain that takes over. Okay? And I want us to really know that it is proven in scientific studies. We're not going to go into that, how they do all of those tests, but it is a fact that when the frontal lobe is not actively in charge, like the school teacher that walks away and goes and has a little bit of a tea break, then the limbic system is the part that takes over. Not one of those other areas of the brain, not the visual center, not the other. It is the limbic system that then makes the final decisions. So if the frontal lobe has been put to sleep for whatever reason, and I see the chocolate cake, even if I have watched the Healthy Harry series of lectures, I'm going to eat it because then there's no frontal lobe to tell me that this is a risky thing. Are we still together? So, which part of the brain do we really want to make sure is in charge? Okay, are we all in agreement with that? Do we agree that if I let my limbic system run free, it's going to be like a whole room full of 2-year-old toddlers? It'll just do whatever feels lekker. That's all that it's going to be. That is its only motivation. And when I've already eaten a whole meal and I'm already full, but then they bring out the dessert, which part of me do you think it is that decides, well, I'm already full, I'm actually cramping already, but I'm going to still have some dessert? Is that a frontal lobe decision? It's not. It's the limbic system that says, dit like lekker. And it just goes for that. Does that make sense? Okay. Just quickly checking that we're together. This is just another illustration. So that frontal lobe is sitting right in the front. It is the part that sits right here. Is there any part of the Bible that talks about between your eyes? Or on the forehead? The seal of God, right? What is God actually saying there? He's referring to? Is he referring to my feelings, my emotions, my visual center, my sensory center? He's referring to the fact that in the part of your brain that can have higher reasoning capacity, that is where I want to connect with you. Okay? So we actually get that from the Bible. Now, let me add to that. This is the only part of the brain that has a moral understanding. It is the only part of the brain that I can use to communicate through with God, to receive information from the Holy Spirit, and to connect with the Lord. They have proven this again in studies because when people have had damage to the frontal lobe, either through a stroke or in a car accident, those people change personality. Somebody who's always been kind and gentle will start swearing. They will start to punch people, for no good reason. And they will explicitly express even that they cannot pray, they can't understand the Bible. That is because this is the part of the brain that we use to understand Scripture and to communicate with God. I ask again, is this an important part of the brain? It's crucial, not just for this life, but the next as well, right? So, when Healthy Harry is doing his office work, which part of the brain are we hoping will be most active? Frontal lobe, right? When he's sitting relaxing in front of the TV in the afternoon or in the evening, chilling, eating something, which part of the brain is most active? It is the lekker part. Here's another question. Are TV programs and media, entertainment media specifically, are they designed to activate or act on any particular part of the brain? They are designed to act on the limbic system and to deactivate the frontal lobe. That is a fact. They are designed to deactivate the frontal lobe because what happens if my frontal lobe goes to sleep? Which part takes over? The limbic system. Okay? So it is the limbic system that makes me, in its happy form while I'm watching the TV program, it makes me eat 2 or 3 packets of chips without worrying about it because my frontal lobe is actually sleeping a little bit. How about in this scenario? Let me ask you this question first. If I have a newborn baby who's hungry and screams until somebody feeds it, which part of the brain? People always start laughing when I say that because it sounds like a trick question, right? It is the limbic system, okay? But is it a bad thing?
No.
It's not. It's been designed like that because it can't help itself. Does it have an actively developed frontal lobe? It doesn't. But when is it supposed to develop? Only when it's a teenager. Do I want my child's frontal lobe only to become active when he's a teenager? Please, Lord, no. I want my child's frontal lobe to develop as early as possible. So when I have a toddler, a 2 or a 3-year-old who is throwing a temper tantrum because daddy said that you can't have the ice cream right now, which part of the brain is throwing that temper tantrum? It's the limbic system. Okay? Are we all in agreement? How do I teach that child to rein in those emotions? Can I teach him that? Yes?
It comes from the bottom side up.
It comes like this. Okay? You're absolutely right. there's an element of this, for sure. But you know, there's an added aspect to that. Because we see one of two responses. When this child is screaming like that, there's either a frontal lobe training aspect that happens this way, or what we see more commonly is this, the child says, I want an ice cream. That's a limbic system request, okay? Then the mom says, no, that is a frontal lobe good answer. This is not good for your health. Then the child throws the tantrum. That's a limbic system tantrum. And then the mom says, okay, here's your ice cream. Don't scream. What am I doing if I do that? If that tantrum comes forward, if that tantrum climbs out of the cupboard, and I then give the child what they want when they're throwing the tantrum, what am I doing? I am teaching that limbic system, this is how you get what you want. I'm teaching the frontal lobe, don't worry, you don't have to think about this process. As soon as you start shouting and screaming, you'll get what you want. And what does that do? It strengthens the limbic system response, and it subdues the frontal lobe. Are we all together? Now, what do I do for me as an adult? Do I still throw tantrums? I hope not, right? But what am I doing if my limbic system says to me, I want that ice cream right now, and my frontal lobe says, you don't want it, it's really not good for you. Healthy Harry didn't look great when he had ice cream. And then the limbic system says, I really want the ice cream. And then I go, okay, let me go buy the ice cream. What am I going to do? Do you see that I'm also actually training my limbic system? Every time I give into that temptation, I'm strengthening that part of the brain. And that is what we tend to do from a young age with children. There's an interesting thing that the Bible says. It says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is older, he will not depart from that. This is a very true verse. I'll be with you in a second. We have to train the brain from a very young age to act in the right way. It doesn't happen automatically. If you leave the limbic system uncontained, it will stay in charge. You have a thought
Just
to
to
add?
summarize that, there was an advert, I think it was for Flake, the chocolate. One bite and all resistance comes.
One bite, all resistance crumbles. And it's amazing. It sounds so, it sounds so positive when you listen to it like that, especially when you're looking at the flake and it looks really delicious. It used to be one of my favorite chocolates. I haven't had one in 8 years. Can we retrain the brain is the next question. Because that becomes the next worry, right? If you sit here and you think to yourself, ugh, I think I've actually been strengthening the wrong part of my brain. Is there hope? Can we retrain it? Yes, I can. Every time I see there's a temper tantrum, which my brain tends to throw, it just doesn't look the same as the toddler. Every time I see and I recognize this is a limbic system request, I can say I don't need to strengthen that response. And if I resist it, I'm strengthening the frontal lobe. Okay? So, we want to share a couple of very practical things for us to wrap this all up. I'm displaying here a list of things that actually put the frontal lobe to sleep. And the reason why I'm showing you this is because it is the part that most of us don't realize. We don't often realize that what we're putting into the body has the power to benumb the frontal lobe, to act almost like an anesthetic. Have you had anesthetic before? Can you fight anesthetic? Once they give you that stuff, either in the drip or in the mask, can you still say, no, I'm not going to fall asleep? You can't, right? You cannot resist it. These things that are on this list are things that literally act in a very similar way to the frontal lobe. No matter how much it tries, when it is in the system, it puts it to sleep. And you will notice there that there are things on here that many of us have oftentimes not even realized that we end up with this scenario. As soon as that limbic system says, I want it and I want it now, we're like, okay, fine, here you go. And then we go back to the things that are harmful for us. And we go back to the caffeine and we go back to the sugar, and I haven't even included everything because actually every single toxin has some negative effect on the frontal lobe. But you'll also notice there are some things in here that I just want to point out, and that is the fact that music is an interesting thing. We have been listening to the most beautiful music this afternoon, and I'm pretty sure that Uncle Pierre has a good appreciation for good music, and I'm sure that he also cringes when he hears not so good music.
Terrible.
Why is it really an issue? Have you heard people saying that there's something like bad music? Is it just a matter of taste? This is the music I prefer, and that's the music that I don't prefer. Yes, we all have different taste in music, in food, in everything, right? But there are specific kinds kinds of music, and I want to encourage you, if you have never gone to study this topic, please do go do that. It is incredibly interesting to go see how the research has been done on this, but there have been several studies that show that polyrhythmic and syncopated music is music that can put the frontal lobe to sleep, but at an interesting rate. How long does it take when I have had a tablet with opioids, like if I've taken some morphine for pain? How long does it take for my frontal lobe to be put to sleep? If I'm drinking tablets, it takes about 15 to 20 minutes for those tablets to be getting into the bloodstream. So in about 15 to 20 minutes, I've got a significant suppression of my frontal lobe. Is that a good or a bad thing? It's really not so great, right? Because as we've said, if my frontal lobe is suppressed, I can't make reasonable decisions. I can't calculate risks. I can do very stupid things. That's why they often have warnings on those packets for those medications. But what about music? How long does it take for the music to do the same on my frontal lobe? Music can switch off the active part of the frontal lobe, especially the risk calculation part, and the ability to make moral decisions can be suppressed by music within 10 to 15 seconds. Seconds. 10 to 15 seconds. That is incredibly fast. And they use this actively. It is not a secret that is just known to the conspiracy world. It is actively used in things like in the music that they play inside the shopping centers, the music they play in the stores. They play the specific music that switches off your frontal lobe, because what happens if you don't have your frontal lobe active and you're in a store? Does it affect how much you're going to spend? Of course it does. So they use that in the stores. Do they use it in restaurants? They use it actively in the restaurants so that you will eat more, that you will buy more, that you will spend more. Do they use this kind of music in parties and clubs? Very much so. Are you likely to drink more if your frontal lobe is not there to say this is a bad idea? Of course you will. And that is why all of these scenarios where we are encouraged to make decisions that are bad for our health and our mental well-being oftentimes go hand in hand with music. I'm not going to go through this whole list, but what I'm encouraging us to do is to say to the Lord prayerfully, Lord, I'm seeing some things, I've learned some things during this week that make me realize that it doesn't only affect my stomach and my liver and my arthritis, it affects my brain, it affects my ability to recognize your voice. And these are things that are worth paying attention to. We touched briefly on caffeine in the week. Do you remember what we said, what the effect of caffeine was on the brain? A reduction of blood flow through to the brain of significant percentages, 30, 40%, sometimes more than that. Which part of the brain in particular do you think that blood flow is cutting off? Specifically in the frontal lobe. That is proven on MRI tests when they check that. Do we want to protect our brains? Which part of the brain do we want to make sure is active and awake? Absolutely. We have spoken about so many different things in this week, and I thought this was a helpful slide to include to summarize a little bit of what we've spoken about. We have looked at the New Start principles. Do you remember that? The laws of health that God has given us, information that He placed in the Bible right in the beginning since creation time. And when you actually look at that, there are two ways that we can look at our health. We can say that we want to put our values, and that includes a clear mind. We want to put that at the foundation, and we want to make sure that we include hydration and sunlight and wholesome food and good rest, and that we use the medical services and pharmaceuticals as the emergency cases, as the last resort that I do if I really need to save somebody's life. But do you agree that somehow in our society we've ended up with a scenario where it's easier to take a tablet? If I got a headache, I put a tablet. If I have some pain, I drink a tablet. If I have any problem, I just drink some more tablets. And I don't always go back and say, where are the free and health-giving resources that the Lord has given us, and how can I use those best? Do you agree that this philosophy has somewhat gotten a little bit twisted in our society? Does it mean that if I have a broken leg, I shouldn't go to the hospital? Absolutely not. But where should our foundation be? It should be in what God has given. Would you agree? More importantly, where should our trust be? Should my trust for my health be primarily in people and what they've designed? Or should it always be primarily at the very foundation to have a trust in saying, the Creator who designed my body will always know best? Do you agree with that? It is my firm belief that we can resort back, and I've included this again just to highlight the fact that the things that we've learned about all week are the same things that not only help the liver. Do you remember we spoke about the good foods that are good for digestion and improving nutritional levels? The same list, these same principles are the same things that are protective for the brain. It is the same plant-based diet, the same well-spaced meals, the same avoidance of things that are harmful that is also going to protect my brain. The Lord has not given us one set of rules for the liver, a different set of rules for the kidneys, and a different set of rules for the brain, just to confuse us. He's made sure that what is good for one organ is good for the other, so that we can have a simple set of principles to follow. Isn't that proof of an amazing God?
Amen.
He wants to bless us. We've shown this illustration, but just a reminder, if you haven't seen our wellness wheel yet, as we call it, or the wellness clock, please make sure that you access the resources that we make available. We will also be sharing the QR code again. And as we keep all of these things in mind, we want to keep in mind that the Lord has given us an instruction about our brains. He's not just said to us, I want you to have a healthy spiritual life. He says to us, I want all of you to be in support of your relationship with me. Do you think that the Lord knows that our brains are the part that we connect with Him? Of course He does, right? There's this incredible promise in Romans 12 that says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, that you do what? By the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice. A dead, dying sacrifice? A living sacrifice. Holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your
Mind.
that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. God says, I have plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Is it His design for us to suffer from all of the negative things? Is His will a will that says, I just want you to live by a set of rules because I want to limit you and keep you away from everything that is nice? It's not what His will is, right? His will is the good and perfect will. And when we have a transformed mind, we can actually perceive that in a better way. I'm ending off with this reminder, and this is again one that we've seen repeatedly. We've spoken about the fact that nutrition, exercise, water, as simple as these things are, they are the basics, the basic necessities for the health of every cell, for the health of the blood, for the health of the kidneys, every other organ, and the brain. And when we're able to live in harmony with that, as this promise so beautifully says, it is founded on the trust in the Lord. It is not founded on human knowledge, but we lean on God and rely on Him. It's an encouragement for us to depart from everything that is harmful to us. And it promises us that that will be health to the flesh and health to our bones. Do we want healthy flesh? Do we want strong bones? Do we want a strong and a renewed mind? I'm going to end off with a prayer, and I definitely don't always want to just extend my own voice time period in these sessions. I don't like the sound of my own voice, I promise you that. But there's this incredible prayer that you've heard so many times before, but I'm going to share with you again. And I hope that as we are summarizing, putting together everything that we've learned about our bodies, that this prayer will reiterate in your mind again, that it will be an encouragement to us to consecrate everything that we have, every breath that we take back to the Lord again. So as you listen to this prayer, I encourage you, if you want to pray, Lord, I want to rededicate my physical health, my mental health, my body, my heart back to you, then I encourage you to pray this prayer with me as well. Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing. this afternoon. We want to come on bended knee in our hearts and our minds, in awe of what you have created, in awe of your wondrous works, and of knowing that you have knit us together in our mother's womb, and that we are that precious to you. We want to say thank you, Lord, that you care for us so much that you have not left us without instruction, but that you give us health instruction, not to restrict us, but to give us life and life in abundance. Lord, may our lives be transformed by the renewing of our minds and our faith in you. May our lives be a practical illustration of the gospel. This is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Jade, for this insightful talk. I don't know, are there any questions that you would like to ask?
Yeah, I just want to ask something. I saw this on the screen there when we were talking. I saw about the scrolling media. Cell phones and young people these days, you can't separate them from that. So I just want to find out how that influences the behaviors and stuff.
Okay. So let me give a out of the shot at this. So most of the young people these days are what they call dopamine addicted. So it's literally the limbic system that's being stimulated. So every time you touch your phone, every time you spend there, it's like, especially stuff like Instagram, you get engrossed in something that someone else does, someone else's life. So it takes you away from your circumstances, and it is giving you that feeling good, but it's stealing your time, it's stealing your joy because you're comparing yourself to other people. So it tends to elevate depression levels, because you see all of these people with the fancy cars and nice homes, and you're not there.
Absolutely. I would add one thing to that, and that is that there's an added element, unfortunately, which is when we're seeing negative things. When we're scrolling through social media, do we also see negative things?
Yeah.
You see, the news of somebody who got hurt. You see people who've had negative experiences. You see violent actions, etc. And your frontal lobe, what is its normal response meant to be if you're seeing somebody collapsing on the floor next to you? Your response is meant to be to reach out and help, right? But now you're sitting with your phone and it's all on the phone screen, so you're seeing a person collapsing and you're seeing people that's hurting and you're seeing violence and etc. And you're literally training your frontal lobe to act passively and not even to respond to that. So it really is triggering a whole bunch of abnormal responses and causes a lot of havoc. The depression rates, the rates of young children, teenage children, and adults for that matter, because we're all unfortunately affected by that whole scrolling palaver. The rates of mental health issues have skyrocketed since the social media has done so. Yeah.
Also, I wanted to say that there's a lot of cyberbullying and a whole bunch of stuff going on with young kids. And I actually follow a lady on Facebook from the Digital Law Company, and she actually is lobbying for children to actually be protected in schools. She gives talks in schools because it's so detrimental to their health.
The crazy thing is, all over the world there are groups at the moment who are trying to encourage for laws to come in that kids don't have access to social media. Are we ever going to get a society where we can shield our children from everything that is bad for them? Now, I'm not saying by that we should just allow them to get exposed, but the reality is if we can train them to have an active frontal lobe, if we can train them to resist and to also exercise self-control, then it gives them an even more effective protection than the country just taking away social media or taking away alcohol or something. So that is why, for me, it's so important for our young kids from a small age to learn that they can act proactively, that they don't have to just respond to the limbic system, because if they know that from a young age, it gives them essential protection. Any other questions? Yes.
Two questions, but they're almost the same. White and black pepper in the system. I've heard, I don't know if it's urban legend, it takes 7 years for it to leave your system. I don't know how true that is. Please clarify that. And then also, you're eating the hot food. I mean, is that good for your system or not? I know cayenne pepper has got lots of medicinal qualities, positive qualities. I'm talking about the highest scopex, I think that they measured on. Scopal level, scoping, something like it. You can just clarify that for me, please.
It's interesting, it's a digestive system question, but actually it relates to the neurological system. Cayenne pepper has excellent medicinal properties. It is very good for the heart, for instance. But even for cayenne pepper, one of the best descriptions I ever heard about remedies is that when your heart stops, they put electrodes onto your heart and shock it. That's life-saving, but it doesn't mean you should do it every single day. Cayenne pepper is a good medicinal, it's got excellent medicinal properties, but it doesn't mean that we should accustom ourselves to always want the strongest tastes. And everything from black pepper to white pepper to many of these incredibly spicy foods are not only damaging to the stomach, they do damage to the inner lining of the stomach specifically. It doesn't necessarily stay in the system, it passes through, but it doesn't really digest either. But the main issue also with all of these stimulants in some ways is that it stimulates that part of the brain that says, I just want more. I want more burn, more flavor, more this. And we end up losing a taste for the simple, nice things that the Lord has also made. So the more simple the diet, the healthier for the brain and for the gut. Any other questions? Related to today or others that you recall from the week that you didn't get a chance to ask? Yes? Can you hear me now? Yeah, you can.
So, do we as editors have a protocol for helping somebody detox from having been on stimulants but not on antidepressants for several years? So I know of an old lady in her 80s, well in her 80s, and she's been on this since for at least 5 years. And the doctor, her GP, just took her off of her medication. And she's been following the health message and stuff like that, so she eats really healthily. But her system is in such a state of, I don't know if it's possible to recover, and do we have a protocol to help with that sort of thing?
It's a good question, and I think it's relevant not only for somebody who's of that age, but for many people when they start learning about the potential impacts of medications, they want to know whether one can come off of them. And I think I would say this, I would never say to somebody just, all medications should be thrown in the toilet immediately. That is not a safe way to come off of medications. When we are trying to switch over to the health benefits of the New Start principles, it is a matter of building the body up so that the requirement for the medication is lessened. And that needs to be done carefully. With that said, the big question really is whether or not medications that affect the brain can eventually be stopped. And the answer to that is yes, it can. But the same goes, you've basically given the brain a chemical effect and it acts on various parts of the brain. So stopping that is something that has to be done with extreme care. And it's not just a matter of, okay, tomorrow I decide I'm just going to leave the stuff. We have to put the infrastructure in place. And I think one also has to recognize that what originally caused them to want to prescribe those medications was a challenge that person faced. So the brain has to be retrained to solve those issues. And can we retrain the brain? Yes. Can nerves be regenerated? Yes. Even damaged nerves can be replaced. We can literally rewire the frontal lobe. We can rewire the thinking patterns, but it does take time to do that. And I think there are scenarios where medications do have to be stopped abruptly. There are, even in the renal units, for instance, if somebody has kidney problems, there are certain medications that even with the risk associated with stopping them suddenly, the specialists would do that because it's life-saving for them to rather stop the medication. Can one deal with that? Yes. But I would say that for anyone who wants to come off of antidepressants, it is best to follow a program that allows for the mental support as well as the physical support to go hand in hand. There are various groups who do that. We have had amazing testimonies from people following New Start programs that we've seen from all over the world. So it can definitely be done, but one has to be very careful. And I think we have to remember that the basic requirements for the body are still there. Just because we've stopped one poison doesn't mean that everything will fall into place unless we support with all the right necessities. And the New Start principles can be used in various ways to support. It's not just a matter of drink more water and everything will come right. So one has to be careful.
I also just want to add, when you decide to go off antidepressants, or even when you go onto antidepressants, make sure that you're under the care of someone who can monitor you, because if your brain is warped, you can do things that you would not do under normal circumstances. So it's always important, when you go off, be under the care of someone who knows what they're dealing with.
I would add to that as well, that it would be helpful to have the support of knowledgeable people who also support the Bible-based concepts. It's very difficult, I think, and I'm sure many of you will experience or have had some experience in this, getting psychological support, for instance, from somebody who doesn't believe in God is very difficult, because then it feels like your belief system clashes with the belief system of the person who's providing counseling. So it's also necessary to look for people to help who are God-fearing, who really place their trust in God, and who are constantly seeking for help as well. Any other questions on this? We have our question box that is still here, and we have had opportunity throughout the week to answer some of the questions, not only in our discussions, but also some of those who've gone into the box. If you are sitting here and you're thinking, I have a question, but I definitely don't want to ask it in front of everybody, please feel free to add it. Because of the fact that today is the last session for us for our health sessions, we won't have more sessions to answer those, but if you leave a question in the box with your phone number, then I will contact you and get in touch. So please feel free to do that. It's been a blessing to be with all of you, and we want to say thank you to everyone who's helped to make these events happen. It's been a real blessing to learn together. May the Lord continue blessing on your health journeys as well.